You really think on the 5th attempt that I could get this video right? Hey, Bruce Naylor here. I get a lot of questions about the Sony FDR-AX53 Handycam, a beautiful 4K camera for creating YouTube videos, just all kinds of stuff you can do with this camera. I did a class on how to get the best 4K video from it, but I also get a lot of questions about this camera. And so I thought I'd just make a quick video and update everybody and answer their questions to the best of my ability. Now, the first question comes from Neil Wiley, who writes, I'm having problems with the autofocus. I need it to focus quick and sharp on a flower as possible. What setting can be altered to help with this? And also, are there any lenses compatible for this model that can achieve an even closer distance, giving a near super macro video quality and image? Any help would be greatly appreciated. Well, Neil, we're dealing with two things here. First, let's talk about the autofocus. Now, the AX53 uses what's called contrast autofocus, and so it's a little bit slower than the new phase detection type autofocus that Canon uses and Sony uses on its mirrorless cameras and also on its higher-end camcorders. It's still very, very good and very, very fast, but maybe not quite as quick and accurate as phase detection. That being said, in the world of macro photography, I always generally stick with manual focus, but if you're going to use autofocus, this would be a good reason to use the spot focus feature on your camera. And I think that would get you the most accurate focus as quickly as the camera can possibly do it with the most amount of accuracy. There is no setting in the camera to change the speed in which it focuses. Now, as far as a macro lens, you have a 55mm thread on the front of the camera. It's kind of short, but it does support various filters. There are some lenses out there. There is a macro lens out there that gives you 10 times magnification at $79. No ratings that I can find on it. Use at your own risk. Maybe you want to buy it and see how well it works for you. I have my Amazon affiliate link to it down below. Never been a real big fan of a lot of filters and stuff for these kind of cameras, as I find things with chromatic aberration, vignetting, just weird stuff, the optics, but some of them are quite good too. Buyer beware situation on that. And hopefully that answers your question. Now, the next thing is really not a question, more of a statement. It comes from Scott L. It says, I wish there was a way to disable or slow down the external lens protector shutter, since it's too alerting to game when turning on, too loud. It needs a power on stealth mode. I'm kind of with you on that, Scott. It is loud. It is distracting. It does make the camera a little bit obvious when you're out and about. Yeah, do you prefer not even having a lens cover at all? I kind of wish that might be an option. My X100 does not have this shutter thing. I look at it as something that potentially go wrong with the camera someday. That's my biggest fear. I'll be honest with you. One day this thing's just not going to open, or something's going to bind it up or whatever, and it'll be an expensive repair. That being said, I understand what you're saying. It's probably a scenario some of these engineers have never really thought about or gave a lot of care about. So I don't really know. I think you just really need a camera for game hunting like that would not have this shutter, because there's not a way to do that. But all in all, it is an excellent camera. Here's a question that comes up all the time from people. And what it is from Meows Aviation, who bought an AX53 in England. And when he goes to the image quality and tries to set the frame rate in 4K, you can only use 24p or 25p. There's no 30p. Any help? Well, a couple different things. First off, these cameras are sold region-based, and your region is set to PAL, P-A-L. The 30p is not going to be, or 30 FPS is not going to be available in your region. And there's no way within the Sony menu system to change it from PAL to NTSC, which would do the 30 frames per second. So that's kind of what you got. Now, there is a project on GitHub, and it is called Open Memories. I'll have the link in the description down below. With this application, you're able to change it from PAL to NTSC. You can do things like get rid of the record limits, like a lot of DSLRs and mirrorless cameras have a 30-minute record limit. You can get rid of that. You can do other things. Use at your own risk. You could potentially brick your camera. I'm not advocating this piece of software. I'm saying if 30 frames per second is important to you, you're going to need an NTSC camera, but then you might have other problems being over in Europe. So that's the reason why you don't have, and we see that all the time because a lot of, Europeans and other people in other countries watch videos produced by people using NTSC, and they'll say, use this frame rate or whatever, and they don't have it. They don't understand that's because they're on the PAL system and we're on NTSC. Bottom line, right now I'm recording this 4K 24 frames per second, and that's going to be, I think, what I stick with going forward is 24 FPS, and we both have those. So 24 FPS for most of your video recording. I think that's probably going to be good enough unless you want to do some type of slow-mo stuff, but that's for another video. Okay, hopefully I answered your question. Okay, the next question comes from John Solo Music. I have a question. How can you keep the camera on even when someone is not operating the camera? That's a great question. So the whole purpose of a camcorder, especially like the X53, is to shoot video. That's its whole function in life. And Sony has made it as simple as you possibly can with a really consumer kind of prosumer cameras, point and shoot. So I have a flip out screen on the size touch based. And once I have this configured to record the video just the way I want it, all I have to do is hit the record button, and I can create a video as long as I got life in the battery and I got storage on the SD card. And the camera will do everything else all by itself. So it's tracking my face here for focus. It's adjusting the exposure. It's doing everything it needs to do. Therefore, I don't need a camera operator. And I don't have to worry about a time limit. Say that if I had a DSLR or point and shoot camera or something like that, I don't have any record length time limits to deal with. I can just keep going and going and going. And that's one of the reasons why I'm a big proponent of a camcorder versus a DSLR. The setup is quicker. I can just pop this thing on, turn it on, hit the record button, sit down and make my video and not worry about what the camera is doing and not making all those adjustments. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay, the next question and the final one is from Colin. And Colin wrote, there are some reviews out there saying that because the camera has a balanced optical steady shot system, it performs bad, especially when on a tripod. Is that true? So I think this is one of those things where there's probably more myth out there than fact. Every once in a while, this will pop up about the AX33 and the AX53. They have the BOS system, which is essentially a gimbal built in the camera. And, if you swing the camera around too hard, the lens will move and all this kind of stuff. Look, I have used this camera from the get-go, and I have had it locked down on a tripod. I have handheld. I have done all these things. This has never been an issue for me. Now, Sony did fix something in firmware that kind of addresses the issue, and it's got to be the way the camera senses that it's on a tripod and disables certain stabilization features when it knows it's on a tripod. But other than that, I have never had an issue. I think for most people, it's a non-issue. I think it's as much urban legend as it is. There obviously was some reality to it, obviously, or Sony wouldn't address some of the issues, but it's not been a problem since. There's no reason to be put off by this camera, using it on a tripod at all. Now, obviously, if you take and you whip it around real hard on a pan, you do have that risk of maybe some movement of the gimbal on there. That is true. I've never, although, made that kind of maneuver on the camera. And I tell you, most cameras, if you whip them around too fast or whatever, you're still going to get what's called a rolling shutter. And so a whip pan is probably not the ideal way to be shooting stuff anyway. That's just my opinion. So don't let this, I won't call it a myth because there was some reality to it, but this has been addressed by Sony a long time ago. I would not let that hinder you in your decision to get this camera. If you buy one and you find an issue with it that it's just not going to work, you can always return it for another camera. So I love it. I think it's a great camera. I'm a big proponent of the AX53. I think it's an ideal camera for a lot of YouTubers out there, content creators, or home users, what have you. I just think it's that nice camera that can do quite a bit for a relatively inexpensive price for what it does. Okay, that's it. Bruce Naylor. Until the next one. Talk to you later.